Welcome to part 2 of our Discovering the Sabbath series, and today I want to talk about Sabbath and work, Sabbath and health. If you've been following along in Swoboda's book, this is chapters 2 and 3. Now I want you to know, I'm just going to say this up front in this video, I'm not always going to mirror the book. What I hope I'm going to do is complement what you're reading, complement your discussion in your small groups or with your family or with your spouse or with yourself. Remember, this is a series that you can do in any of those facets. You can do it as a group, you can do it as a couple, you can do it as a family. And I encourage you to do that. Because the best work we do, I think, is in some form of community. However, if we're by ourselves, you and God do this work together, and that's powerful in its own right. So I was thinking about one of our own here at St.Francis, Morgan Ray, who at the time of this filming is actually in Portugal, I believe, and swimming in the Swimming World Championships. And I got a chance to talk to Morgan since I've come to St. Francis in February, and I'm just mesmerized by his humility. I'm mesmerized by his intentionality around his sport, his passion for swimming. For those who didn't know, Morgan is what I like to say, he's vertically challenged, but he's much taller and greater than most people I've ever met. And he swims. If you've never had a chance, you got to look up and watch how he swims. So as he was leading into these world championships, which are everything for him because he wants to make it to the Paralympics in some country in a couple years, wherever that's going to be. You know, this is Father Justin. I don't always remember where things are, much less names. But what's more important about Morgan is as I was talking to him going into these championships, I noticed at one of our parish functions, he had like a plate full of donuts, a plate full of all these things I wouldn't expect. We'll call him an Olympian as far as I'm concerned. This incredible swimmer, what you would think you'd put into your body, right? We've all been jaded by the Michael Phelps story of 10,000 calories a day and everything's regimented. And I looked at Morgan and I said, Morgan, how can you do that? And he said, part of what I have to do leading up to these events is rest. And if I don't give my body some of the things I enjoy, then I'm not going to perform the best I can perform. And then as I got to talking with him over the next couple weeks, I learned that he'd been training really hard, and then the closer we got to the World Championships, the more rest and recreation he took, the more he slowed down. And for weeks, he stopped practicing. Now, I don't know how crazy that might seem to you. You would think, most of us would think, if I'm headed to a race, I'm a runner, if I was going to go to a race and I actually wanted to win the race, this is why Morgan's a better athlete than me. I would train right up too. I'd be running the darn race the day before probably. Because that's what we tell ourselves. If we want to be the best, we're supposed to grind and grind and grind and grind, right? That's what we do. But people like Morgan, these amazing athletes, these humble athletes remind us that life doesn't have, you don't have to be enslaved to this training regimen. You don't have to be enslaved to the sport you love. You don't have to be enslaved to these things. You love these things. Morgan loves to swim. He's an incredible swimmer. And he knows how to train. And part of his training is rest, is recreation. It's dabbling in those things he enjoys. It's not swimming every day for 10 hours a day. If he did that, he wouldn't be in Portugal at the World Championships right now. He'd be like me on the sidelines. But that's not who he is. He's and in my mind, whether he says it this way or not, he understands, like many athletes, the rhythms that God instilled into creation to help us find our best. He knows how to rest. He knows how not to overdo it. He works and then he rests. And that makes him a better athlete. It makes him a better human being. So as we think about Sabbath for work and Sabbath as health, many of us are enslaved to different things. And that's really important because, right, when going back to my first installment in this series, I talked about the Israelites in the wilderness. They were enslaved in Egypt. Moses brought them out of the land of Egypt, remember, through the Red Sea, the great parting of the Red Sea, and into the wilderness where they lived for 40 years. And during that time, all they had known themselves to be were slaves because that's what they were in Egypt. They were enslaved to the work that Pharaoh had asked them to do. And in some ways, when they ended up in the wilderness, they wrestled with God. They wrestled with Moses. Are you going to feed us? There's no food out here. We were better in Egypt. We were better being enslaved because we knew what to expect. In actuality, they weren't. And that very narrative reminds us, it reminds me, what am I enslaved to today? What is it in this world that calls me away from God? What is it about this world that teaches me not to slow down? Vanessa and I love going to New York City, right? The great city that never sleeps. Have you ever thought about that? That's jacked up. The city that never sleeps. You've got to sleep. You've got to rest. And I know, and I love it. It's endearing. I understand why they say that, because that's a city where people are coming on shifts, going off shifts all night and all day. And the city's always moving. But in reality, we don't want to be that way. Simon Sinek, in his book, The Infinite Game, it's a book that's really shaped my life recently in the last several years since I've read it. And I encourage that book to anybody who works out into the world. He talks about how we often are enslaved to the race in our careers, in our life, and we don't even know where we're going. We're just running the race to nowhere. We just assume we have to get that next promotion, we have to get that next thing, and our young people, they've got to be the best, they've got to be the valedictorian, even though there can only be one, but everybody's got to try for it. When in actuality, you need a first place, a second place, a third place, fourth place, 100th place, because we're people, and we're capable of so much, and our number and our rank doesn't define our impact on humanity, our impact on this world. And that's what Simon Sinek talks about in his book, and that's Sabbath. Right? Sabbath is rediscovering ourselves in light of the way God made us. It's finding those rhythms in our life, with our families, with our children, where we refocus on God, reconnect with God. We slow down. We sit in church. We don't keep running this race to nowhere. It's kind of sad in America that most people, when they near retirement age, don't know how to retire. They don't actually know how to stop. They don't know how to stop working. Now we've gotten to the point of society where you have to sit with you have to pay somebody, unless you have a family member or a friend who does this, pay somebody to do your retirement plan. And I'm not talking about your finances. I'm talking about what you're going to do when you're not going to an office or going to work every day. That's pretty sad when you have this beautiful world to go be a part of, and you have so much to give back to the world because God has endowed in each one of us gifts and talents. And when we think about Sabbath for work and Sabbath for health, we remember people like Morgan. We remember those people in our life who taught us to slow down, who taught us to focus. I remember Simon Sinek in this book I read about finding our purpose. What is our just cause? And in Christianity, we call that our calling. What is our calling? What is God calling us to right now? And what's preventing me? What am I enslaved to that I can't connect with that? We have to figure that out. And discovering Sabbath, finding Sabbath, slowing down helps us be better Christians, helps us be better people, better husbands, better wives, better children, better everything. When we find that time to rest in God, to worship, to be together in our community of faith, to be here at St.Francis, together, listening for the voice of God and finding God in what we do. Because we can run the race to nowhere. We can do that. We've been doing that for eons. Or we Christians can discover the Sabbath and we can slow down and we can show others that you don't have to say yes to the world all the time. The world that takes more and more and more of us. We rest, we focus on God, and we go deeper in our faith. And we find health, and we find focus, and we find that our work, the work we do professionally, and the work we do in our calling and sharing our gifts and talents are more life-giving because we bring God back into the conversation. We bring God back into the world. We bring Jesus to bear on those around us. That's all we can ask for. So I encourage you to consider that this week. Over the next several weeks, what are those things you're enslaved to? And really start to let go. And I'll see you next time as we go even further into Sabbath.